Chapter 30. Corin followed Wedge from the small room into the hallway and farther along to an even larger room. The first people he saw there were the Bothan Asir and the Deveronian he'd helped to escape from the warehouse. They were already seated at the large round table in the middle of the room. As he came around Wedge, he saw Flurry Viru looking very imperial, and Zekathine looked pale and in a bit of discomfort. Looks like not everyone escaped unharmed. Corin! Ayala! Arcing his back, he picked her up in a big hug and hung on tight. I can't believe you're here. Gil did this to me. The identities he set up were on Coruscant. Ayala pulled back away from him, but kept his hands in hers. I can't believe it's you. If seeing Thine hurt had made Corin feel good, seeing Ayala made him feel almost whole. I spent too long with nothing and no one from my past aside from Whistler. It was as if that world didn't exist. He smiled. Where's Derek? Ayala's smile froze for a second. Then she glanced down. I don't know. I'm sorry. What happened? A year ago or so, he was picked up in an imp sweep and never came home. I bolted, made some Alliance contacts, and joined the rebellion. There's been no word, and after this amount of time. Corin nodded and hugged her again. Derek Wasuri had been an interesting man. Old family wealth allowed him to lead a life of leisure. He viewed life as a collection of phenomena to be studied and experienced, but he was not one to let those experiences change him. He was easily 20 years Ayala's senior, but they fit together like oxygen and hydrogen. Derek didn't always agree with things Corsac did, but he made an attempt to understand what had been done, and that quest for enlightenment had impressed Corin. This is not the time to tell Ayala that Gil is dead and that Lure killed him. There will be opportunities later, I'm sure. Derek was special, but so are you. It's great to see you again, despite everything else. I agree. Ayala squeezed his hands gently. And Mirax asked me to be remembered to you. A smile blossomed on Corin's face. She's here? How? The skate brought the rest of the squadron here and couldn't get away. Ayala frowned. I would have thought the others had told you how they got here. We were a bit busy when we ran into each other. No kidding. Mirax has threatened to give you speeder bike lessons. First rule, she says, is stay away from buildings. Corin laughed aloud. Yeah, we'll have to discuss that more. Thine snarled. How long is this chummy crap going to go on? Patches, someday when you have a friend, you'll learn that this is what you do when you haven't seen each other for a while. Corin released Ayala, and she moved off to take a seat next to Winter. Well said, Lieutenant Horn. Voru folded his hands together on the table. However, time is of the essence, I gather. Shall we get things underway? Commander? Corin took a seat beside Wedge, placing Winter on his right hand. Ayala sat next to her, then the two aliens, and finally Voru and Thine. Corin noticed that Thine held his right hand and forearm protectively over his stomach. Gut shot. Painful. Good. Wedge stood. I want to keep this as simple as possible. Since the warehouse incident, we have all come to agree that working together to oppose the Empire is preferential to each going our own ways. Each of our groups has strengths and weaknesses, most of which overlap to minimize our exposure to the enemy. We can all agree that we will fare better on Coruscant once the Empire is overthrown, and accomplishing that end is a goal of the rebellion. Originally, Rogue Squadron was sent here to rescue Coruscant and gauge the vulnerable to recon Coruscant and gauge the vulnerable points for later exploitation. The problem is that Warlord Zinj is testing both the Empire and the rebellion. The Imperials know that to attack him is to weaken themselves to the point where they cannot prevail. The Alliance knows that to pursue Zinj would dilute our strength so that a strike at Coruscant won't be possible for years, perhaps even decades. This means the Alliance will have to strike in the very near future, and they want us to open the gates to Coruscant. Flurry Voru tapped a fingertip against the tabletop. Bringing down a planet's shields is not an easy proposition. Agreed. Wedge leaned forward on his hands. The central computer complex here is the key. Is it fair to assume Black Sun slicers have not been able to insert code into the master programs that control the planet? The white-haired man sat back in his chair. I believe the discussion of that point is premature. Oh? Quite so, Commander. Voru nodded towards the representatives of the alien Combine. Their stake in this is quite clear. The Imperial regime is decidedly cruel and inhumane in dealing with them. The liberation of this planet would benefit them enormously, and you rebels, well, you would be achieving a goal you've been focused upon for at least 7 years. I mean, Winter, dear, is it every Alderaanian's dream to replace your lost world with Coruscant, is it not? Winter's eyes glittered coldly. The Alliance's goal is to see the deaths of the evil that destroyed our world. Alderaan cannot be replaced, and certainly not with this transparisteel and duracrete mausoleum for an empire. Wedge folded his arms. Your point, Voru? My point, Commander, is that the Alliance is not likely to be any more favorable to Black Sun than the Empire was. Less, in fact, I suspect. I want to know what is in this plan to reward me and my people for their cooperation. Corran snarled. Why don't you start with your liberation from Kessel? Voru smiled delicately. You would gladly see me back there, would you not, Lieutenant? If your plan succeeds, you might find yourself appointed Minister of Security. If the cursing about you and your family done by Thine here is any measure of Horn efficacy, I think I prefer having Isan Isard opposing me. What I would like, Commander Antilles, is some guarantee of clemency for those of my people who work to help you overthrow Isard. And if that is not possible? Relocation to a world of my choosing, a world that will be made part of your alliance with me at its head. A world you will turn into a haven for crime? Ayala looked disgusted. Corran shook his head. He's smarter than that. He'll solicit bribes from worlds so he doesn't end up there. He'll be rich enough to buy a star system or two. Voru opened his hands. I seek a world where I can live out my days in peace, and you think poorly of me. I find it hard to believe you hold the rehabilitative qualities of Kessel in such contempt. Enough. Wedge held a hand out to forestall Corran's reply to Voru's unctuous comment. I'll give you my personal guarantee you and your people will not be held responsible for crimes committed when you are acting in concert with us. That doesn't mean a sociopath like Thine here is free to slaughter innocents. We're only going to hit legitimate military targets. The streets start running with blood, and I'll burn your people down myself. I think this is the best offer you're going to get. It's acceptable. For now, Voru nodded. And no, our slicers have not been able to get into the main computer. Thine shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We should just blow it up. Everything will stop and the shields will come down. No, they won't. Winter frowned. Damage to the main computer system will transfer control to satellite facilities. While they are not as well guarded as the main facility, they will not be easy to take over. There is also a possibility that crucial systems, such as shield control, could get shunted to another satellite center, if there is trouble with this one. In other words, to get the shields down, that way we'd have to guarantee a strike at all of the satellites, as well as the main center, and we don't know for certain where all of those subsidiary centers are. Voru smiled. I can furnish you with those locations, but your reservations about so explosive a plan are justified. It strikes me that something more subtle would be preferential. Asir laid a hand gently over one of Voru's. I don't understand why it is so difficult to slice code into the main computer. There are billions of transactions and messages that go through the system on an hourly basis. Something ought to be able to get through, shouldn't it? Wedge shrugged. Seems like it, but I guess not. Winter? She tucked a strand of white hair back behind her ear. The Imperial computers operate through a very restrictive language that has a hierarchical command and access structure. Programs that go in to be effective across the system have to be authorized at the highest security levels. These levels are ultra-secure. Programs are scanned for content, and that content is compared to their access levels. If a system program comes in without an access code that is cleared for entering system programs, it's dumped. Corin frowned. If you were able to wrap a program up in the right disguise, it would get through, though, right? Presumably, but we don't have the right codes. Those codes are changed by the hour, and old memory cores are swapped out daily and destroyed within a week. Though after a day's worth of use, they're pretty well ready to be junked anyway. Each night, clean new memory cores are placed in the computers, and trillions of exabytes of transactions are transferred to the new cores. This happens throughout the system. Asir nodded. The production facility for the Palar memory cores is on the Invisisec border. Nasty work making the things. All sorts of noxious chemicals go on the data retention surfaces, then a lot of energy gets used in formatting the cores. We lose people every day in that plant. Wedge folded his arms. If they're getting new cores daily, how does the transfer of data occur? I mean, if an old core is replaced with a new one, how does the data from the old core get onto the new core? They have two banks of cores, and the data is transferred from one to the other. The process doesn't take that long. Winter smiled. The Imperial Senate's computer system used the same security system, but on a much smaller scale. Half a standard hour is all it should take to complete the operation. Corin sat back. What happens to the transactions that occur while the transfers are taking place? They get caught on a subsidiary memory bank and queued up to be sent into the main banks when the appropriate cores are free. Then those cores send the data over into the new banks. Okay, Winter. Now what sort of program governs the transfer of data between the banks? She looked at Corin oddly. Pretty basic stuff. Universal to every system, really. It goes into cores when they're formatted. What are you getting at? Data goes from the first bank to the second, right? Yes. And it goes fast because, presumably, it was checked as it came in and anything bad was discarded, right? Yes. So if something on one of the subsidiary cores was shot over into the security core during the transfer, it wouldn't be checked by the second bank, right? Winter began to smile. And altering the transfer code on one of the subsidiary disks so it would send a rebel program over when the secured transfer was taking place, instead of blocking that transfer the way it's supposed to, wouldn't be that hard. Because, said Asir, we have access to the plant where the cores are manufactured, and we can alter the code used to format the memory cores. Right. Corin beamed. We send over a program that causes us to be given clearance codes and addresses for the shield maintenance programs, and we can bring the shields down at will. Voru bowed his head in Corin's direction. Corsek's gain was Black Sun's loss. You have a devious mind. It's a pity you decided to use it to hunt us. Corin winked at him. That's the trick of it. I can't stand the thought of a criminal who's dumber than I am profiting by his crimes. Neither could my father, which explains why we shortened Patch's career. If your father was that smart, he'd still be alive. Corin refused to be goaded. This operation is a little bit more important than punching holes in your fantasy life, but the time will come. Thine started to get up, but Wedge pushed him back into his chair. Stay down. Make me. Voru's right hand struck fast and slapped Thine on the belly. The younger man howled. Then, as he doubled over, Voru grabbed him by his neck and slammed his forehead into the table. Thine, glassy-eyed, rebounded, and Voru flung him from his chair. For some people, discipline is a lesson. For others, it is a lifetime. A shiver ran down Corin's spine. He goes from gracious to vicious in less time than it takes for darkness to come out when a light goes out. And Thine is out like a light. He exchanged a knowing glance with Ayala and saw her shake her head. Wedge looked at the man on the floor, then shrugged. We have enough, I think, to begin some planning. Winter, if you can have your slicers begin the programs we'll need, that will be a big help. Asir, we'll need the basic security set up on the Palar plant, plus the routines and any computer security information you can get us. He looked at Voru. And you. I will find out if any of the computer core technicians have any interesting vices we can exploit, or an interest in exploiting the vices we have to offer. I think that will be fine. Wedge smiled. In 2 days we'll meet again and see how close we are to making the plan work. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.